Hello. I'm revisiting this topic to make my objections to the faulty logic clearer and to encourage those who take time to dispute the arguments of flat earth apologists to highlight these issues as part of their discourse. Before that, some groundwork. Ever since I've been looking into the arguments of flat earth apologists, I've been frustrated by the lack of any precise definitions of what flat actually means to them. So I'm going to propose one that, being based on the concept of drop, should be acceptable. And it goes like this. On a flat surface, all observers, or objects, are in a zero-drop relationship with all other observers, or objects. This can be represented this way. We have a flat surface and an observer on it at point A. They will be in a zero-drop relationship with an observer at point B, who will be in a zero-drop relationship with an observer at point C, which is also in a zero-drop relationship with points A and D, and so on. We'll explore the details of a zero-drop relationship later on. The other idea I'm going to use is what I call the Sherlock Holmes heuristic. In several of his books, Conan Doyle has Holmes say some variant of the following. How often have I said to you that, when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth? While this seems like a sound approach to finding the truth, it is in fact rather problematical as a method in general, as discussed on Rational Wiki. For my purposes here, we will characterise one of the major issues this way. If you don't know about the butler, you can't conclude that the butler did it. With that done, let's review the flat earth argument we are going to dissect. It is based on the so-called black swan photo, and I've heard a couple of apologists explain that this is their strongest argument for a flat earth. In presenting it, I've tried to boil it down to its essence, so it runs like this. I can see an object d distance away. The only explanation for this is that it is a flat surface between me and the object, therefore the Earth is flat. Even in this form, issues with the argument should be apparent to most people. So how do apologists try to get this by their audience? They do this by the way it is presented. They start by embedding the argument in this structure. You, who believe the accepted science, are wrong. Therefore, I, the flat earth apologist, am right. This is a challenge to those who accept the current consensus in this area and distracts from the details of their arguments by misdirection. This is a form of call-out as if science was a wrestling championship. Inherent in this call-out is the idea that there are only two possibilities to explain the observation. Either the Earth is flat, or it is a sphere of radius of 6,357 kilometres or thereabouts. As I pointed out before, this is a false dichotomy, but I think this can also be considered as the apologist implying that they are using the Sherlock Holmes heuristic as a method of arriving at the truth. When confronted with the argument presented this way, there is a tendency to rush in to defend accepted science with a rebuttal of this form. You, the flat earth apologist, have made an inaccurate analysis of the spherical Earth case, and therefore your claim is incorrect. This throws a spanner into the logic of the apologists as a way of winning the argument. I have a number of issues with this approach. Firstly, it validates the call-out which is being used to obscure the actual argument. Secondly, it accepts the logical fallacy as a meaningful characterization of the situation. And finally, it allows the mug filter to continue operating. What do I mean by this? In the Nigerian prince email scams, it's thought that the spelling and grammatical errors in the messages have a positive effect for the scammer of screening out people who would be unlikely to fall for the scam. By not fully dismantling the black swan argument, we allow those who might not follow the explanation as to why the accepted scientific consensus is also an explanation for being able to see the object, and might lead them to believe that the apologist has a legitimate and valid argument. In many instances, in addition to the shape and size of the sphere, other scientific principles need to be deployed to explain why the object can be observed, and this can be seen as trying to cheat or wriggle out of the claims of the apologists. So, what's to be done when presented with arguments for the shape of the Earth that are presented in this way? We could immediately challenge the false dichotomy and demand to know why they think these are the only two possibilities. Alternatively, we could accept that they are trying to use the Holmes heuristic and use the unknown butler against them. What are the unknown butlers in this case? Well, one of those would be a sphere of a much larger radius than the accepted one for the Earth, say 20,000 kilometres. On such a sphere, the object would be visible using the same calculations that they used to say that it would not be visible on the consensus-sized sphere, but without having to invoke refraction. It still throws a spanner into the logic of their argument, but also highlights the logical fallacy. Of course, there are many more butlers hiding in their arguments. All the other spheres, tetrahedrons, hexahedrons, dodecahedrons, and all the other hedrons. Also, who said the Earth has to be a regular shape? If you are disputing the current scientific understanding, then you have to eliminate all the other possibilities if you are using the Holmes heuristic. You can't ignore butlers because existing consensus say they are not relevant. That deals with the issue with the only claim in the premise of the flat Earth argument, but what about the logic of the overall claim that the Earth is flat? Remember, the argument is that the only reason I can see the object is because it is flat between me and the object, and therefore the Earth is flat. The principle that apologists use, going back to Rowbottom in the 19th century, analyses such observations through the notion of drop. When using the false dichotomy, the argument is that on a spherical Earth there is a certain amount of drop between observer and object, and this would render the object invisible. In contrast, on a flat Earth there is zero drop between observer and object, which is why the object can be seen. They then claim, from the single observation, that the whole Earth is flat. Now, recall my characterization of flat Earth as represented by this figure, which requires all observers and objects to be in a zero-drop relationship with each other. And note that the apologist's argument only references one such observation, represented in the diagram by, say, the points A and B. We see that this falls far short of establishing the zero-drop property for the entire flat surface. Also, this property is an all requirement, which requires a very large or possibly infinite number of observations, meaning this is a property that can only be established inductively rather than deductively. I'm not aware of any apologists undertaking such a research project using their faulty premises to satisfy this characterization of a flat Earth. But that's not all. If we take a close look at the zero-drop relationship, we notice that it is in fact only a relation between 2 points, and it says nothing about what is going on between the points. It does not guarantee that it is actually flat between the 2 points, and it makes it look like this is a necessary condition for a flat surface, rather than a sufficient condition for a flat surface. If that's true, then, even through all the faulty science and logic of the black swan argument, you could never reach the definitive conclusion that the Earth is flat.